Okay, so people, well, Warhammer fans, have been losing their minds lately. Specifically about Warhammer Warcry, the very popular skirmish wargame from Games Workshop set in Age of Sigmar. A game that everybody I have ever spoken to has loved. Yes, that means that the only people that I speak to are wargamers who also happen to have played Warcry. My social circle is very small. But nevertheless, there has now been rumors and leaks and declarations and fears about this Warhammer game. I've been seeing them on Reddit, inside my comment section. There's even entire YouTube videos about it, all of them declaring that Warcry is over, that it's dead. Not to mention that a man violently screamed at me in the street last week that the end is coming. Though I'm not sure if that was entirely related to Warcry, but it makes sense that people are really worried about the future Warcry, because things do look like Games Workshop are about to kill it. Or rather, they already have, but we're being told that it's living its best life on a farm somewhere, when the reality is that it was just too expensive to operate on. Incidentally, that's also why you don't have a little brother anymore. Now, this video is going to be very controversial because it looks like there's actually a truth to this rumor, but there's also a dark secret behind it too. A secret that reveals a truth of Warhammer that no one talks about, but one that should terrify everybody, especially casual hobbyists as we go forward. Plus, I got some bones to pick with a major YouTuber, and it's probably gonna start a few knife fights. And also, I might be the only person in the world who doesn't like Warcry. Sorry, I know, discourse minis, disliking a thing. Can you imagine? I can't, I love lots of stuff. I'm a very positive person. Well, at least watch the content, don't just judge it on the thumbnail. But okay, I didn't like Warcry, but lots of people really did, and they're really upset about it going away. And they're wargamers, my kind of people. And yeah, Warcry got a lot of great press. It was, for many people, the first game of its ilk that they'd ever played. A game with small war bands fighting one another in a fast-paced action skirmish. I mean, it was essentially the Age of Sigmar equivalent of Warhammer 40k Kill Team, but without all the line of sight shenanigans that makes you want to ram a fork through your opponent's eyeball. Or at least play another game that is a bit more sensibly written. But the miniatures for Warcry were nice too. I like the fleshed out Chaos Warbands that really added to the world building of Age of Sigmar. But these were often sold in big massive FOMO boxes, which I wasn't a fan of. And I must admit that while close to scratching some itches, none of the factions ever really spoke to me. Especially later on when they just started becoming a bit randomly chosen from various Age of Sigmar factions. And I must admit, the core game mechanics of Warcry always felt like your entire purpose was to simply roll sixes, or else you'd lose a fight because rolling criticals could be so powerful. I never really felt like I was making very many meaningful choices. Which was all great for casual players who wanted to show up with a bunch of miniatures and just roll a bunch of sixes. That's fine, but it just never really clicked with me. But lots of my friends loved it. It was fast and furious and could be played in a few hours. Compared to regular Warhammer 40k or Age of Sigmar, which can take an entire evening, or day, or weekend, or life. It was quite revolutionary to have such a playable experience for many people, especially Warhammer hobbyists who have never ventured outside of the Games Workshop gilded cage. I mean, that's where all the money goes, right? Towards the gilding. Now, the last edition that came out for Warcry was 3 years ago in 2022 with the Heart of Gur. So I always expected the third edition of the game to come out this year because, well, it's been 3 years, and Games Workshop operate on a 3-year schedule. Every 3 years, each game just gets a new edition. But then I watched this video by Uncle Adam, who pointed out that the last time we even heard any talk about Warcry from Games Workshop was in September of last year. Over 8 months ago. And much like a pregnancy, if you don't hear anything for 8 months, it's often not a great sign. And it's very unusual for Games Workshop. Typically, they like to do a post every so often about their stable of games. I mean, even Lord of the Rings gets a post every couple of months, and they're the red-headed stepchild of the Games Workshop family, who was definitely fathered by the Milkman. You know, because it has simultaneous combat. And also it's black. So this radio silence has fueled speculation that Warcry is over, but there's even more evidence too, the most damning of which is the fact that all the Warcry models went to exclusively online late last year, and many have also been totally culled from the store, almost wiping out people's entire collections of models, most of which are the best models for Chaos in Age of Sigmar in my opinion. I'm gonna be honest, I kinda love these little guys. I think they're great models, but but they can't be bought anymore. You know, unless you scour every online store from Korean to China, which is why 한요. But even if you don't want to buy Warhammer from online sellers on the other side of the world, learning another language is incredibly valuable, either for travel or for accessing entirely new media, or for business, or simply to impress your friends because you've always been deeply insecure. And the best way to learn another language is with Airlearn, a language learning app that's in the top 10 charts in over 50 countries. And it's not hard to see why, because Airlearn offers a totally free and effective way to learn languages like Spanish, French, German, Japanese, Korean, or Chinese, among others. Simply download their app from my link below and you'll get access to a completely ad-free learning experience consisting of teaching slides to help you learn the vocabulary and grammar of your chosen language, as well as interactive exercise slides to help comprehension and retention, all while keeping it casual and fun. And learning another language is fun and helps keep your brain fresh, agile, and elastic, something I'm increasingly worried about as I get older and social media destroys my attention span. But I've had a great time with Airlearn. It's been a totally stress-free way to learn a language without any pressure, and it's really helped me understand my chosen language of Mandarin Chinese. And on days when I need a little bit extra motivation, Airlearn's competitive leagues push me to keep going and improve my ranking. So check out my link below to download and try Airlearn for free, and thanks to Airlearn for sponsoring today's video. 我去小子. Okay, maybe I need to do today's lesson after recording this video. So yeah, collate all the evidence together, Warcry looks to be gone. But honestly, I'm not entirely surprised, because there is a dark secret to how Games Workshop have begun to monetize their games, and Warcry does not fit that new business model. See, Warcry was always a casual match play experience where you could meet up every so often for a game at your local game store and play against a friend. It's casual, it's pretty light on competition. But the secret to Games Workshop's Warhammer focus in the last few years is that they've been increasingly obsessed with competitive gaming, because competitive games create the type of wargamers that will be constantly making purchases and buying more product to keep up with the meta. That's also why lots of smaller wargames survive by being hyper-competitive experience, because it compels more purchasing from hobbyists. And note that we're often made into competitive players rather than simply being born one, as our expectations for what a war game even is shaped by the companies that make them. I mean, just go back like 20 years ago and war games used to be about club play. Tournament play was a very small niche part of the hobby, but now most war games are increasingly focused on tournament play, and that's a huge shift in the entire hobby. And I'm not saying that competitive players are like ontologically bad or anything here. I mean, we're all bad. Most of us eat the flesh of animals, we're destroying the planet, and we lie to our friends about our porn habits. No one must know. But it's just the case that competitive play has come to eclipse other forms of play like narrative gaming in the Games Workshop business monetization strategy, and so Games Workshop have pushed a conception that playing Warhammer is by necessity a competitive treadmill experience where you will need to buy the latest and greatest toys to keep up. Even if you don't like the models, if they're at the top of the meta, you're gonna really want to buy them. I mean, you want to actually win some games, don't you? It takes some resilience to resist that kind of siren call, even if you're never going to play in a tournament. So when we do get casual friendly games that are designed for casual fun from Games Workshop that could potentially undermine that messaging, we end up getting games that look more like Spearhead, which I praised a lot on the channel, but that game acts as just the first part of a pipeline designed to get new players from not knowing how to roll dice into a more competitive, money-hungry main game of Age of Sigmar, and it all reinforces that central business model. Get people into competitive play, get them wanting to have powerful models, get them spending money on the newest stuff. And that is a business model that doesn't really seem to have a need for a game like Warcry anymore. I mean, hell, Kill Team was in the exact same boat until it became a competitive game with extremely high cost of entry in its own right, and crucially, all the models in Kill Team are also used in Warhammer 40k, so that entire game gets subsidized by 40k players. And yes, you could do the same same for Warcry, but Games Workshop tried that, and honestly, Age of Sigmar doesn't appear to have a large enough population of players that will justify it. I mean, nor does Warcry even have a big enough player base to justify the massive box set bundles and marketing that Games Workshop love to do for the games. And I'm going to be really controversial here and say that, honestly, that's all down to the Age of Sigmar setting. Look, I don't mind Age of Sigmar, I'm actually warming up to it a little, but it just is not as popular to Warhammer 40k. You can see that the licensed games haven't taken off, the sales of the miniatures aren't amazing, and the new edition kinda bombed. And that's even with the fact that it is, in my opinion, one of Games Workshop's best games. It's just that the setting really holds it back, and it's clear that it is just not as compelling or as popular as 40k, even if it does have its own dedicated fan base. So, okay, we have a game that can't justify a kill team business model, so what can Warcry do? If it can't be kill team, what can it be? Well, the answer is right in front of us. The answer is Necromunda, a narrative, more casual-oriented, less investment-heavy game, where a few models can come out every so often and support play. You don't need giant box sets and bundles, just release a couple of models every so often. Hell, move it from the main studio to the specialist design team. You can keep the core mechanics, the reactions, people like those, the die rolls, and even the activation structure, but make it focused on campaign play, on narrative play, because frankly, I think that a more campaign-oriented game would be more interesting, it would be funner, and it would certainly entice me back into trying the Warcry system again. Because there was a spark there in terms of game mechanics, and with some tweaks, some faction variety, like actual mechanical variety rather than just a coat of paint, and even some additional list building, it could be very fun. So yeah, Games Workshop, do a Necromunda game, but this time, spend longer on the rules. Maybe play a few games before releasing it, you know? Maybe don't have an arbitrary deadline that is just impossible to hit and still turn out a good game. Now, okay, I did see that the YouTuber Uncle Adam also argued that no matter what happens, Games Workshop should put up all the Warcry content online for free so people can keep playing it even in the face of its obliteration. And yes, Games Workshop should. It would be the best thing for consumers. They should honestly do that for all their games. But that said, Games Workshop are also the company that hired people to go through all their old White Dwarf magazines and actually remove any rules for any of the old editions of Warhammer because they were worried that someone might use their archived White Dwarfs to play a version of Warhammer that isn't the most up to date. I'm gonna be honest, I don't think we're getting great archive integrity from these guys. Literally 1984. I know people like to say 1984, but that is literally the plot of 1984. But that also brings us to the rumors and leaks out of Games Workshop that allegedly they might be working on a brand new edition of Mortheim, that super popular, or at least fan favorite, cult sensation from the 90s. It was also a fantasy war game, and if there's a new version of that coming out, maybe that's why Games Workshop have been so silent on Warcry lately, because the game is being cancelled to make way for that Mortheim. And Uncle Adam was not happy about this, but I would disagree with him. I'd love to see Mortheim come back. The only problem I have with Mortheim, though, is that the mechanics really need to change. I don't think that old school Mortheim with a you go, I go structure holds up particularly well, especially compared to new games like Port Royal. The mechanics of Mortheim just need a refresh. So then, in that sense, why couldn't Mortheim simply be Warcry 3rd edition, Mortheim edition, narrative play with fun arcade mechanics? That is a killer combo. So, sorry Uncle Adam, I do want Warcry Mortheim now. Mordcry. I made like a hopefully more polished and less expansion heavy Necromunda game. I can see that, that would be a lot of fun. Though honestly, all of this is now irrelevant because I just got burrows and badgers and it makes Mordcry look like shit. Just kidding. I still love Mordcry, but even if it doesn't happen and Warcry simply dies forever, then remember there's never really such a thing as a dead game. If you want to, you can keep playing any game you want. I mean, I still play 4th edition Warhammer 40k because I have friends who want to play it. This is all physical stuff. They're books. We can't be locked out. Or at least that's what people say all the time, and honestly, that's sort of horseshit. They're all our dead games. It's very hard to convince people to play games that just aren't being actively supported with new products and expansions by living companies. People don't want to play games that no one else is playing or talking about. It gets incredibly niche otherwise. It's important to have a community, and anyone who says that it isn't just is wrong. I can play 4th edition 40k only because I happen to know people who want to do that already, but I think there's a lot of newer people in the hobby who would not be interested at all. It's kind of like facial tattoos. You can do it, but it's gonna be a struggle. So actually, no, I hope that Warcry comes back, and I hope that it has a dose of Mortheim sensibilities, even if I was never its biggest fan, because otherwise, that would just suck for Warcry players, and the game will die, and people will stop playing it. That is just the reality. And it's certainly true of Mortheim right now. It's very hard to get games in there unless you happen to live in an area where people play lots of Mortheim, which, by the way, I think is what, like Munich? So if you don't live in Munich, you're shit out of luck. But what do you think? Let me know below. And if you want to support this channel, cover wargame news with some insight and also lighthearted japes about the inevitability of death, please check out my Patreon for game reviews, new videos, bonus live streams, and a whole ass free game, because I cannot do this without your support. I rely on patrons to actually exist. Thank you for your support, and I'll catch y'all next time. Bye bye.